to be aiding or helping our people and avoid telling them about the truth of Moorish history in the world, and particularly in Europe, etc., including the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is where you get the term to be born again that you hear Europeans talk about in church, etc. And that's where the seven liberal arts were introduced to Europe and brought them out of what is known as the medieval period into the modern era.
As a student of history, I also know civilization's debt to Islam. It was Islam at places like Uluzar that carried the light of learning through so many centuries, paving the way for Europe's Renaissance and Enlightenment.
When the Moors first came into Europe, they were coming up out of a lot of different situations, a lot of different diseases. Africans brought in the concept of soap. They brought in something that they called alcohol, A-L-K-U-H-L, and today we call it alcohol. They realized that the great majority, upwards of maybe somewhere between 95 and 98% of Europe was illiterate. Now, illiterate, we have to understand, is that the world was an agricultural world. There was no real reason to study the higher levels of science and arts. But in Africa, these subjects had been in place for thousands of years, and they brought these universities in, and they began to build these universities, and they began to educate the people. The first math rigor that you face in freshman year is algebra. This is algebra brought in by the Moors, and it's the search for the unknown. So you're searching for what that X represents. And the equal sign, we know that whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you do on the other side of the equal sign. So you have in your formulations the idea of searching for the unknown by searching for justice and balance and harmony and the laws of Ma'at. So after you have mastered algebra, geometry, and trigonometry, you then begin the calculations of the heavens and the earth, which we call calculus. So they brought in this concept of a pattern of study.
Usually it's just referred to as the seven liberal arts: rhetoric, mathematics, cosmology, etc., linguistics, trigonometry. It's the foundation of what is used in general education actually across the world.
It was innovation in Muslim communities that developed the order of algebra, our magnetic compass and tools of navigation, our mastery of pens and printing, our understanding of how disease spreads and how it can be healed.
Of course, they have subcategories, jurisprudence, and you have subcategories. And jurisprudence actually is the superior title under which laws come, or what you call laws, the studies of laws, the types of law, categories of law. And so law would come under jurisprudence.
The educational system too, we were the first mothers and fathers of them. The first mothers and fathers of civilization teaching history and law and language. So all of that comes from us. Even the language we use today, we say it's Latin, but we call it Moorish Latin. And they use Latin today in the courtrooms. You follow me? Everything they're saying in the courtroom is Latin. In propria persona, amicius curiae. They're Latin terms which also extended from the Moors, which is also an offshoot of Arabic.
And of course, as you can see, many of the Europeans would imitate the Moors, and they had set a party forth, was known as the Whigamore Party. And this is where Europeans would wear the curly wigs that they do even today in England to imitate the Moors, who actually brought them civilization.
They had a freedom of religion. So every spiritual system had their own court of law and the way in which they would develop their court of law, and they would judge themselves. And so what Africans brought in was a tremendous amount of freedom. There was a great amount of freedom for women. There were women who were brought into the main industries.
And throughout history, Islam has demonstrated through words and deeds the possibilities of religious tolerance and racial equality. I also know that Islam has always been a part of America's story. The first nation to recognize my country was Morocco. In signing the Treaty of Tripoli in 1796,
The science or the culture of the Moors is loosely referred to in world culture as the study of mother and son, or what you call Osset and Oris on her knee, which is mother and son, or masonry. And so when you're talking about Moors in Europe, you must recognize that the United States Corporation Company is a European colony, and you cannot separate the two. So if you're going to talk about European history or American history, they cannot rightfully be talked about as separate subjects because they're intertwined, actually. And of course, this is also why anyone in positions of authority or what you call political economic powers must be Masons and must in secret wear the Moorish fez. Even they dress it up in jewels and they pin the tassel down because they're not the Americans. We are.